of the school's budget for this position and approval or not approval. With that in mind, I would, Mr. Klein, would you provide us with the information, please, sir?
Sure. I do from your you want.
The mic's all right. Oh, maybe it isn't.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, definitely use that because the owl doesn't do a good
Doesn't
job.
do a good job.
Yeah.
All right, bow your heads, please. Heavenly Father, we thank you for all things that you have given us. We thank you for our jobs here in the county, that you allow us to be elected to do people's work. We ask that we have well thought through discussion tonight, that we will do your will and the will of the people. We ask all this in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Okay. I would entertain a motion to approve the. Sorry. There we go. Can you hear me better now?
Yes.
I entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Go ahead and recognize the public. Ms. Tina Stevenson.
Okay.
Just
Turn on where it's
There
red.
you go.
There.
You're good.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I'm Tina Stevenson from 798 Clark Hollow Road in Westmoreland, from Westmoreland High School. Last week, the Supreme Court recognized families of disabled children versus schools and districts. The Supreme Court lowered the standard for the burden of proof from proving gross misjudgment to instead deliberate indifference. This is the common theme families like mine face. We share our needs and concerns and are purposefully ignored. Deliberate indifference from our local, state, and federal governments in regards to special needs individuals and their caretakers is discrimination. As a parent, my priority has to be Reagan and his well-being. Maintaining my household, activities with my other kids, date nights, mom night outs, these are some typical things we have to neglect. Other children at home are often also caretaking. God bless us with Reagan, but we know this job is lifelong. Parents like us are always thinking about and planning our future, how we'll cope as we age, and how we'll take care of them. They will always be dependents. Many people carry on innocently indifferent to our day-by-day struggle, but we're often treated as inconveniences in public spaces. It's not uncommon to face discrimination. We've been asked to leave public events or move to other locations simply because my son was there. We're stared at, sometimes with understanding, but often feeling like animals in a cage. Reagan is a behaviorally and medically complex multi-handicapped student in Sumner County. He is nonverbal autistic. He has impulse control disorder. He may throw and break things, run off, or steal food from others. He has sensory processing disorder. He has pica, an impulsive condition where he eats non-edibles. He stuffs his food and is a choking risk. He has idiopathic scoliosis and hypotonia, making him a fall risk. He is not fully potty trained. Being an 18-year-old and a male, due to liabilities, he must require 2 adults to aid him in the bathroom at school to help change his clothes after accidents. These diagnoses and behaviors require a staff to be with him all day, 100% of the school day, according to his IEP. When it comes to his education, we can no longer tolerate deliberate indifference. We expect our kids to learn at their pace, according to their needs, and to be safe. In early March, we learned of a possible loss of staff. I began reaching out to administration to reevaluate our situation. The few responses received were in regards to ratio and, surprisingly, not budget. It dehumanizes, though, our children by calling them numbers in a ratio. Ratios are to protect a classroom from having too few staff. There are reasons for exceptions. Where is the due process of the county evaluating individual education programs, our IEPs, and staff our classrooms accordingly? Sometimes kids can be grouped together with one teacher, but for my child and many others like him, they have a plan and cannot be grouped with the CDC teacher. This is for their own safety, the safety of their peers, and the other staff. I'm requesting the staff member who was fired to be rehired in our classroom to restore us to 3 assistants. This staff member knows our kids, their communication, and their behaviors. Very few people are willing to do this job. Our teachers and assistants have the hardest jobs for the least pay. They love our kids and treat them as their own. Losing this needed staff is like removing a piece of the puzzle, like taking mom from the family. This brings harm to the child's emotions, education, and creates an unsafe environment. It also brings down morale amongst the staff and the families they serve. I'm going to explain this using numbers. Right now we have 6 students, 1 head teacher, and now 2 assistants. 3 students need constant supervision and guidance to complete their IEP and to remain safe. Our 2 assistants and head CDC teacher will do an amazing job taking care of these 3 students. But now what does that mean for the remaining 3 CDC students? I hope the county can see that the ripple effect of neglect in this budget area is a high possibility due because there's simply not enough staff. This liability belongs to the Department of Education, not our local school. Staffing our classroom at WHS by using a minimum ratio will not work here to maintain our safety for our kids. These kids must have consistency to be successful. This includes at home, school, and throughout the summer through an extended school year program, ESY. Appropriate ESY is often denied to the students in Sumner County. Kids like mine heavily regress during long breaks and struggle to get back into their routines. In general, rapid change is a struggle. But in conclusion, we're just begging those maintaining our budget understand that Sumner County must stop denying extended school year for our complex, multi-handicapped, multi-diagnosed children and ensure that every staffing position is filled according to our IEPs. Sumner County, please do not remain deliberately indifferent to our community by actively ignoring our safety concerns. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. And if I have to leave, it's because I got to go take my son home to bed. I'll stay as long as I can. Thank you very much.
Stacy Williams, 6714 Old Highway 31E, Westmoreland. I'm here also to speak on behalf of the staff member that was let go at WHS. I didn't have a speech, but I was going to speak from the heart. When I heard of Tina getting out and activating for this cause, it brought back a lot of what Shay's been through the school system. We went through Westmoreland Elementary School. We had 2 different teachers. My son is fully nonverbal autistic. He requires somebody to be with him at all times, or he could run from them. He could pull a fire alarm. He will not go to the bathroom by himself or anything like that. We went through the middle school. We went through 2 other teachers there as well. Staff, they don't want to do this job. We get to the high school, freshman year. First 3 days, Shay pulls the fire alarm. We get a phone call. We go pick him up. The 4th day we took Shay back, the fire alarm was fixed. But it took all those teacher aides, the teacher, the principal. It starts at the top. Mr. Duffer came by. He talked to us. We worked through it. We got that problem fixed. This has been the best school year that my son has had in Sumner County. Now, you guys may not see this, but when he's at home, Shay is calling out his teachers and his aides by name. He is excited about going to school every day. If you don't have a special needs child, you don't understand what we go through every day to deal with this. My wife is a stay-at-home mom. I work 7 days a week to provide for our family. Because that's the way, sometimes you have to make sacrifices. If he jumps, we have to run. If he goes to the bathroom, we have to go. So taking this aide out of this classroom, to reiterate what she was saying is, there's 6 kids in that classroom. If her child goes to the restroom that requires 2, you're leaving 1 aide in there to take care of those 2 other childs that are at risk. What if Shay was to have a meltdown in the classroom, hit his head up against the block wall? Where do we stand with this? We ought to put these kids' safety first before we worry about cutting positions like that in the classroom. I get we need other positions within in the main office. I get that. But we don't need them like this. These aides are not making that much money, y'all, but they're doing a wonderful job for our kids. They're keeping them safe. And I'm sure she can say this too. Man, he has got the best situation at WHS right now that he has had. This will be his 10th year in school he's ever had. And he is already talking about registering in July. When I left home a while ago, I said, I'm going to a meeting for your school, buddy. And he got upset. He goes, don't go till July. And I was like, yes, we're going in July. But he's already talking about seeing his teachers again and seeing Mr. Duffer. He's excited. So I ask you all tonight, please dig deep into this budget. We need her back. She has been, it's like a family to us up there. And it's others in this county. I'm sure they need it as well. Appreciate y'all's time.
Ms. Heather Broadway.
Good evening. My name is Heather Broadway. I live at 160 South Tunnel Road in Portland, Tennessee. I am a mother of children with disabilities, and I'm here tonight not just as a parent, but as someone who is deeply frustrated. Sumner County's ongoing indifference towards students with disabilities is not only unacceptable, it's actionable. Right now, the infrastructure in our schools completely leaves out children like my daughter Avonlea, Aaron's son Greer, and so many others. These are intelligent, joyful kids deserving of connection and play. But they face physical and systemic barriers every day. You didn't just overlook them, you made it clear that they were never factored in. And every day that you fail to act and you continue to uphold a system that excludes them. That's not passive failure, it's active discrimination. Let's talk about the playgrounds. We're not talking about cosmetic issues. We're talking about dangerous conditions, broken slides, rusted platforms, sharp edges, and inclusive swings that lack even basic harnesses. These aren't isolated problems, they're widespread, documented and ignored. Keeping unsafe equipment on school property puts every child at risk. That's not just morally wrong, it's legally indefensible. Playgrounds aren't a luxury. They're essential learning spaces used 180 days a year. They're where children develop social, emotional, interpersonal skills that classrooms can't teach and standardized tests cannot measure. And yet they've been ignored on your watch. If student safety truly matters, then why were athletic facilities fast-tracked with millions in funding, while playgrounds remain unsafe and inaccessible to the youngest and most vulnerable students in this county? Last month, we asked for $1.5 million to begin addressing ADA accessibility. You responded with $250,000, a dismissive amount that doesn't even cover concrete for a quarter of the schools that we have in this county, let alone surfacing and adaptive equipment for the remaining schools. Hi. Meanwhile, your reserve fund, our tax dollars, sits full, and public financial records have quietly disappeared from the county website. You didn't just forget us, you chose not to serve us. That's not oversight, that's discrimination. You've prioritized appearance over access and comfort over compliance, and you've done so with the full knowledge of your obligations under the law. The Americans with Disabilities Act requires equal access, not just for wheelchair users, but for students with autism, sensory needs, and physical limitations. And this month, the U.S. Supreme Court, as mentioned earlier, made it clear public school districts can and will be held accountable. So let me remind the board of something critical. You expect children to be in school because attendance is compulsory under the law. And but that same law requires you to provide the school environment that is accessible, inclusive, and safe. If they are legally required to show up, then you're legally required to make sure that they all belong. So I'll close with this tonight. I am formally requesting on public record a full review of ADA compliance requirements for school playgrounds with clear documentation, a dedicated budget of at least $1.5 million to begin funding comprehensive ADA compliant upgrades as requested by Mr. King last month, a clearly defined ADA compliance timeline with progress tracking and full financial transparency restored immediately. You've had time, you've had resources, and now it's time to act proactively, transparently, and in good faith. Because the alternative is no longer theoretical. It's public accountability that will cost this county far more financially, reputationally, than doing simply what is legally required of you guys. Do better and be better. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Elizabeth Broadway.
Are you staying with Mommy? Okay. Good evening, I'm Elizabeth Broadway. I live at 160 South Tunnel Road, Portland. Last month I sat in for the first time and observed in person at a board meeting. We are at the beginning of our journey in the public school system, and as someone who went to private Christian schools my entire life, this choice was made purposely so our children would experience and have friends of all races, genders, disabilities, and socioeconomic differences. In last month's meeting, as a mom of
2 children with varying disabilities, I was incredibly shocked that the numbers for disabled students listed and then talked about were only the ones who are wheelchair users. Our disabled kids include way more than that. We have visually impaired students in our school, as well as other disabilities that fall under the ADA. It felt minimizing at best, but honestly ignorant to who falls under ADA protection. Any student with an IEP falls under this category, and in preschools alone last year, there were 40 incoming students with IEPs. I know this because my daughter was one of them. She's not an incoming student to Betty Bills this year, as Mr. Langford suggested last meeting. Last month, you voted only $250,000 to help our schools become more accessible. We have 27 elementary schools. Not one is compliant, let alone accessible. I know this because my dad poured concrete for over 30 years, and we had a really long conversation at Bledsoe this past week. To give our kids equitable and legally required play areas, you are giving barely a quarter of what was asked and will most likely be required to get our playgrounds to the most basic ADA standard, let alone the request Aaron made at last meeting, which is to leave a legacy of what schools should be doing for our kids. Mr. Langford also mentioned playgrounds fell under PTO responsibility previously, but when government law requires something, it is the responsibility of the county who knows and understands these laws to fulfill them, not pass the buck to parents that have no idea or understanding of what should go into a playground. My son played baseball for 1 season, and within a week of us bringing our daughter and having to pull in the grass, the city had a brand new sidewalk built. 1 week. To say we are going to wait for our grant writer to now start working on finding money to match what we already have in the millions of so we can get the ball rolling is blatant indifference, especially after Mr. Langford so graciously reminded us that things just keep getting more costly in last month's meeting. Not to mention, something that was put into effect 2 years ago, our athletic facilities, is still being worked on today. So, if you wait your proposed time for research to find matching funding, the likelihood of Greer getting to play on this equipment will be non-existent, and my daughter will only have 2 years to play with her peers on a playground that should have been made at minimum compliant, but at best accessible years ago. We have had, as Mr. King mentioned in previous meeting, our reserves in the millions for the past 5 years. Knowing our reserve, which is our taxpayer dollars, is so ridiculously high and the board still refuses to pass a working number that would get our schools ADA compliant is absolutely disheartening and illegal. I will also briefly mention as a board, you continue to barely raise teacher wages, you take away school supplies because we're no longer receiving a government grant, you've eliminated vital special ed teachers due to ratios, and yet somehow we miraculously have the funds to create a higher up administrative role that have zero impact on the actual social and emotional or educational well-being of our kids. I am disappointed in this board and its members, who only 3 responded to my email, and of those 3, not 1 was my representative. It should say something to this board that we will have 3 fully accessible playgrounds that parents like us paid for, found grants for, raised money for in this county. It's a need, not a want. We are zoned for a Title I school because we live in a rural part of our county. We love our school, but I will say the difference that I can see in our Title I schools versus our non-Title I schools is very telling, and I have pictures to prove this if you are curious. I could not, if we won the lottery for Union, who has gorgeous paid for by their PTO playgrounds, send my child there because these playgrounds are completely inaccessible. Don't think these years of indifference for our children, not just our disabled ones, is going unnoticed. Maintaining our playgrounds and athletic fields should be a much higher priority in our budget than maintaining a reserve in the millions every year. To close, I would like you to know a new ruling has been passed by the Supreme Court that is going to allow parents to sue the public school system for indifference. You may not have had your position for years, but you are the ones who have it now, and I hope you rethink the amount you want to put towards righting previous indifferences, because we will be on the front lines of making sure our children receive their legal rights which you are currently denying them.
Okay, I see no other public comments, so we move on. This is my report. I have no specific report today. I'll do the education committee chairman for
Yeah, my only report, I guess, regarding the education budget amendments, which is later in the agenda. It's just information on the, just be simple pass through on that. And then just a comment, from what I gathered from listening to the citizens' comments just a second ago, on the surface at least, it seemed like a lot of their comments were directed toward the school board and not so much the county commission here, but I definitely appreciate you coming tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Maybe I'll make a quick note here. And this is just for information purposes. I do appreciate the comments, but just procedurally, the only thing that this body can do by law is either approve the school budget or vote it down. That's all we can do. We do not have the ability to line item any specific things. So I appreciate the comments, and I very much appreciate everybody coming up to speak. I just wanted to understand procedurally, the only thing we can do here by law is to vote up or down on the existing school budget. So that's just one comment. Moving on to new business. Move on to item A, FY 2026 school budgets, general purpose. Without I can vote on it to suspend the rules to allow Dr. Langford to speak and present this budget.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, Dr. Langford.
All right, and I think this is the presentation coming up, or did we?
We may have failed here.
Okay.
So we may have to follow the law. Mr. Mayor, do we have any AV support? Good. Okay.
All right, let me see.
Let's see if we can do that. We're going to be able to do it. We'll be able to do just a 3-minute recess and see if we can wire this up.
There's a input down here. I think it's HDMI. I think it's that one right there. Yeah. Yeah, I know where the HDMI cables are.
This is on. This is for this year.
Well, I could just run through it. I can go upstairs if she got it. They're all the biggest ones.
This one says,
Thank you.
back in order. Apologize for that, guys. Dr. Langdon.
All right, and I'm going to try to run through everything pretty quickly because I know it's been on the school board website for about a month. I did want to, and it's not the exact same presentation, but I did want to hit some highlights, and I'm happy to entertain any questions you might have. I do think it's important to understand some of the things beyond just the numbers in the budget and what it stands for and what it means for our kids, because, you know, I think one of the great things that's come out of the tours of commissioners and school board members is we get to understand each other's world a little differently and better. And I think that's been really good for us this year, and I appreciate all of y'all for coming. But I'll try to go real quickly because I know it's been a busy budget season and we're not done yet, so try to get done pretty quickly. We try to always, when we're doing a budget, we're trying to think through how does this affect our students? Like every decision we make should be connected to what makes things better for our kids. So we engage students in academic exploration and creative problem solving. We coach students to overcome obstacles and achieve success. This is different. In the past, we've used the language of intervention a lot, but I think that intervention stigmatizes. You go back in time, we used labels like red birds and blue birds. We did reading groups, and people knew if they were in the top group or the low group. What we're saying is all students start somewhere. Some kids start higher, some kids start lower. Some kids are higher in math and lower in reading or vice versa, but all kids are kind of all over the place. You have some that are just great at everything and some that struggle at everything. But if we use the language of coaching kids where they are up, it removes the stigma language of intervention. And so we're trying to move a little bit away from that. We support students to be healthy and resilient, especially post-COVID. We are still seeing students coming in who, when they were before the age of 5, they didn't go to preschool, they didn't go to daycare, they didn't go to church. They lost a lot of socialization opportunities, and we're still feeling some of the effects of that with behavior, especially in elementary classrooms. And so how do we support students to be healthy and resilient as kids get older? I think not this budget, but next budget you'll probably see stuff because we got to address cell phones, but that's a different topic for a different night because, you know, research starting to come in that says cell phones are more dangerous than nicotine. So how do we support students to be healthy and resilient? How do we give them opportunities to struggle productively? How do we give them opportunities to fail and get up and learn from it? So that when they hit college and career, they're ready to face whatever a very uncertain, rapidly changing, evolving world throws at them. We prepare students for their first and future careers. 50 years ago, you might be able to leave high school and go get a job and work that job your entire career. That will not happen today, most likely, unless you were very lucky. Generally, people are going to work 6 or 7 different jobs over the course. Probably now, kids that graduated this year, by the time they enter the workforce, there will be a significant number of jobs that we can't even imagine what they are right now. because of the infusion of AI into everything. It's going to be a rapidly evolving, changing world. We empower parents as vital partners in teaching and supporting our students. It's tough being a parent in this world today, and we want to provide the most support that we can for our parents. And then we connect students to serve others and give back to our local community. This is where when we try to anchor our budget, when we try to innovate, when we try to invest, these are the areas that we come back to make tough decisions about budgeting. Because I think everybody knows, just as y'all are doing budgets here, you always start off with about $100 million or more in wants that are all legitimate, that would all be great for the county. And how do you whittle that down to a budget that matches the money that we actually have, the revenue that we have? And we have the same thing. Sumner Gives Back has been something we've really worked on this past year, especially, that will take off even more. We believe that the county pours, the county commission, the state, school board, local businesses, parents, everybody pour not just millions of dollars, but millions of hours into our kids. And so encouraging them to understand that things like the Strawberry Festival in Portland don't just happen. There are a lot of people, thousands of people that have their fingerprints on that, or downtown events in Gallatin or Hendersonville. Our kids need to understand that they have a civic responsibility. Honestly, we dropped the ball on that for about 30 years in public education, and we need to reclaim that and teach that again so that kids have civic understanding and responsibility. And then Sumner Ready, we prepare students for their first and future career. Kids have a certain set of skills that they need when they enter kindergarten. They have another set of skills that they need when they exit high school towards their career. And we want to make sure from the first time they enter our schools until the last time they exit, that every day we're working hard to prepare them for what's next. Taking the walls off high schools. You can see on the left, Be Pro, Be Proud was Meta has it's more than a bus. It's this giant vehicle where you can come in and it has all kinds of different career options, and you can look at it through virtual reality, AR, and get to experience a bunch of different careers. The problem that we've had, I don't know if any of you have ever heard any angst about Liberty Creek. I'm not sure if you've ever heard any complaints. One of the things we understand is whenever we build a new school, we want to build it to the current generation standards and look forward to the future. How do we lift that up for every other school? And one of the things is how do we begin to create opportunities for students where you're not limited by your zip code, right? The only kids that can take aviation should not just be at Liberty Creek High School. The only kids that can take cosmetology should not be at White House High School and Gallatin High School and Beach High School. The only kids that take culinary arts should not be limited. How do we create a system so that kids can stay in their home school, but also take advantage of the career technical programs we have across the county? And how do we lift things like dual enrollment and AP offerings for kids around the county? That's the challenge for the next generation of schooling. High school has changed almost zero structurally since 1906, when Andrew Carnegie created the Carnegie Unit and normalized schools across the country. It was a great innovation in 1906. There needs to be some changes to it, because the problem we have now is that we have about 65% nationwide of kids that are in high school that are to different degrees checking out. And how do we find ways to reconnect them? And a lot of that is connected to problem solving. On the right, we have a young lady from Liberty Creek High School who, in her nursing class, learned CPR. And when Billy, there in the hospital bed, collapsed in the men's locker room at the YMCA, she ran in, gave him CPR for 10 minutes and saved his life. What's fascinating about this picture that ties in is not just her heroic action. One thing is she wasn't sure, she spoke at our CTE day, she wasn't sure that she had what it took to be a nurse. She wasn't sure she had the grit to handle it, but she gave CPR for 10 minutes and now knows that, hey, she's ready to be a nurse. Billy was at our CTE day thanking her. He's paying for her to go to school. But one of the other things he said is he was listening to us and he heard us talk about our aviation academy. And he said, hey, I'm the CEO of a company that does aviation mechanics and does individual flights for celebrities and things like that. I would love to partner with some kids coming in, because I realized that by all intents and purposes, I should have died on the floor of the Y. And I've been given a second chance in life, and I need to find some new ways to connect and give back to my community. And that's kind of the power. It's not just us. It's just the power of good things in the community happening and us connecting students in with our community. So I'm excited about that. And I'm really excited. We have the opportunity. You will have before you in July the lease, hopefully, if it passes the school board tomorrow night. The Carolyn Smith Innovation Center, we haven't quite hammered down the name yet, so this is still kind of evolving. This is the former Smith Travel Research. It's if you're coming from Hendersonville on Gallatin Road and you go past the Walgreens before you get to the bypass, there's a road that goes off to the right. If you're coming from Gallatin, it's right after you cross into the bypass. But this is a 60,000 square foot building that's almost like a blank slate. It's a beautiful building. The Smith family has given support to Sumner County Schools for decades. Mr. Smith sold his business a couple years ago and did really well, and they wanted to do something to honor his wife. So, they are leasing us this 60,000 square foot space for $6 a square foot. So about $363,000 a year. So this is an opportunity for us to really move much more quickly than I could have imagined on taking the walls off high schools. This is a rapidly evolving. I believe that we can generate, we're always looking for ways, I think speaking to the Budget Committee and Education Committee, we're looking for ways to generate opportunities for kids that don't require more infusion of property tax money or pennies from the property tax. We believe that this can, we've already had almost $1 million of outside money from corporations and other groups contributed to just get this off the ground. We believe it's possible that we could get around $10 million a year from outside money to help support and drive innovation. Everybody in the country right now wants to transform high school. Everybody in the country realizes that it needs to change. The problem is that it's really hard to change because there's a whole lot of different actors, a lot of bureaucracy from higher ed, from Washington, from the state. But I will say for the first time in my educational career, there's a confluence of all the different stakeholders and actors that's moving towards allowing us to change. Even the change of the Carnegie unit, which is required to go to a four-year university, the Carnegie unit is starting to change. They're doing some things like in Kentucky. I won't bore you with all the details. I'll be happy to talk to you after. But Algebra 1 and English 1 are two huge sticking points in an academic career. If kids get through English 1 and Algebra 1 without failing, they almost always graduate. But if you think Algebra 1, you sit in a class for 18 weeks. Right? If you fail it, you repeat it. What Kentucky and some other states are doing is they're badging Algebra 1 so that there are like 9 skills that you need to have to be able to do about 89% of the jobs in the United States currently with the knowledge of Algebra 1. But instead of having to pass-fail Algebra 1 and repeat the whole thing, when you earn that badge, you've got it. When you enter the next one, you've got it. You don't have to go back and repeat everything. You basically do Algebra 1 until you complete those 9 badges, and then you can move on to geometry or Algebra 2. That's the kind of innovation that we need at the state and federal level that I believe is going to start opening up to us in the future in ways that I never thought before. But what we're envisioning here is an ability to gather students from around the county to do some things like, I'll give you an example. This just happened this year because we were talking about Sumner Gives Back. We had a group called Sleep in Heavenly Peace that built beds with a goal that no kids in Sumner County will sleep on the floor. They came out and they wanted to build 30 beds, and we got our construction classes from Westmoreland High School, Beach High School, and Gallatin High School. It was amazing because the Westmoreland construction class has been around a while. Those kids got off the bus in bib overalls. They were ready to go. They had their tools and they knew exactly what to do. Beach and Gallatin's classes just started. They were a little bit gun shy at the start because they didn't realize they were actually going to be doing something and building actual beds. But within 30 minutes, the kids were all mixed up. They were working on projects. The Westmoreland kids went back. A kid goes to the Methodist Church in Westmoreland. They were talking about how it lit a fire in them to give back to the community. They heard at church that in East Tennessee, where the flooding had been, that there were families in FEMA housing that didn't have corporate places to gather. So they started building picnic tables. When they would build 8 picnic tables, they would ship them on a trailer to East Tennessee. That's the kind of fire that we want to run to scale in the county. And one of the ways we can do this, what I'm envisioning is you have a group of problem solvers, kids from across the county that come together here, and they have charities, nonprofits, churches, whoever it might be in the community, comes in and says, hey, we need this. It could be Cragfont, it could be a ministry, it could be a nonprofit. And they say, hey, we need this, and that group of kids puts together a budget, puts together a plan. They go to one of our existing CTE classes and explain to them what's needed. They develop it, they take it to the client. We do that for them. We do an after-action report. We engage kids. The number one skills that kids need moving forward is the ability to solve problems and the ability to work together collaboratively. I think we can do this with entrepreneurship. We're starting an aviation academy in January where kids will get 4 dual enrollment classes with MTSU and aviation. That's going to be open to everybody in the county. So I think you can see a whole lot of programs like this, but also having space for kids who are doing problem solving across different disciplines where they can get together and work on things together. So a certain amount of their time is working together, what I think would be towards projects that benefit the whole county. I don't want anybody to leave Sumner County Schools without a strong understanding that they have a commitment to give back to the community. So this is, I'll just show you, we did one tour, and I know that not everybody could come, but we'll do another tour prior to y'all voting on the lease. We'll get another tour because it's hard. The pictures are amazing, but when you walk this space, it inspires you to think creatively. And honestly, it's pushed us. You know, this is a slide that we made about a month ago, and I would say if I remade it right now, I would change some of the things because I can envision some of the things being like having actual corporate partners come in with some of their teams, and our kids work alongside of them to problem solve and to work towards a solution for something, whether that might be, you know, we have met, Amanda, we've met with entrepreneurs in healthcare, we've met with Oracle, we've met with Meta, we've met with companies of all different sizes and all different fields already, and they're all really stoked that we could be able to help develop kids that come with these type of problem-solving careers or skills and are interested in future employment, right? Because there's a huge need for kids in all of these different areas. If you go out back, I don't have a picture of that. There's a garage in the back that I don't even know how big it is, but it has a 20-foot boat in it. It has the bays, like Kai Perry, that's our aviation teacher at Liberty Creek, said you could easily put 3 planes in there and still have room to do a mechatronics lab and welding space. You just imagine getting kids together to not just think about things intellectually, but to actually get in there and build and make and hear problems and come up with that. I know I need to move on. This gets me really excited, so I'll try to move on really quickly. Here's a classic example, Gallatin High School this year. We had a boy that got a 35 on the ACT. He took all the coding classes at Gallatin High School by the end of his sophomore year. He wanted to be a mechanical engineer. He's going to Tennessee Tech. They didn't really know what to do because he'd taken all the coding classes, but they said, well, if you're going to be a mechanical engineer, you should go in mechatronics and learn how to use all the equipment that you'll use as a mechanical engineer, but learn how to actually operate it. There was another boy in there, big belt buckle, boots, what you would imagine a 25-year ago Gallatin High School student in a welding class would look like. Those two get together, and the teacher said, y'all won't believe it. They've got, we use some of our ESSER money to get one of those robotic arms like you see used at Gap and places like that. They said they did the manufacturer training. They mastered that in like a week. He's like, they get on YouTube and they figure out how to program this arm because you come in one day, they got it hitting golf balls. You come in the next day, they got it stacking shelves. He said, if I throw them a challenge at 8 p.m., they've got it solved by 9 a.m. the next morning. And those two have become best friends. Those are not kids that would have bumped into each other and created a friendship in Gallatin High School were it not for that opportunity in a class. Those are the kind of little creative collisions that we can create and initiate, and those kids are going to do something pretty amazing in the future. And it's going to be exciting to watch, and that's what we're kind of looking at. Kids are a lot more mobile. You know, like when I transferred after 8th grade from Beach to White House, I didn't really have a whole lot of contact with kids that I went to school at Beach with because I was in White House then. Kids now, through travel sports and everything else, they already are interacting a whole lot more. Taking all that and harnessing it towards good ends and productive ends and creative ends really helps us support parents, support our community, and prepare really strongly for the future of Sumner County. All right, we are taking another experiment that we're doing this year is we have 30 pre-K classes, a mix of 3 different types of pre-K. So some is special education, so students that are coming in at 3 or 4 years old that have been identified to need special education services, and we want to start that as early as possible. The earlier we can help a child get started, the better their educational outcomes are. Those classes have peer buddies that are not special education students that are there to work together, to buddy up, to help. We have voluntary pre-K, which is for economically disadvantaged kids and families. So we have a mix across the board. Typically, we've had those spread out in schools where we have room. The Gallatin schools, the problem with it is there are a lot of different rules for pre-K that you don't have in K-5. And it's very different than everything else you do in the school day in terms of the school day, the way you teach, the way you eat, everything, because you got 4-year-olds, 3 and 4-year-olds. So one of the things that we want to do is we've got the old E.B. Wilson building, and so we want to bring all the Gallatin pre-K classes together there. It's 8 classes. And what we want to be able to do is concentrate our services, because also those are some of our most vulnerable kids in terms of learning to read. We can concentrate the resources that we have in the central office, because it's right there on the central office campus. It lifts some of the burden off our Gallatin schools, but it also lets us really serve those kids better, because you're picking up some efficiency by putting everybody together instead of having 2 classes here, 2 classes here, 2 classes here, 2 classes here. If this works out like we think it will, then next year what you'll see is around the county we'll start congregating more of these into central locations. Obviously we don't have a lot of empty buildings, but we have some schools, for instance, like an H.B. Williams or Beach Elementary, where we've got capacity in the school, and we could move some of those there and support kids learning. Because obviously, like if you have 8 of those classes, it's a lot easier to provide a lot more support than it is if you have 2 in each building. So that's one of the changes that you'll see next year. When COVID money ran out, when the ESSER money ran out, the state dropped the $10,000 a year that they were giving to STEM and STEAM schools. We are number 1 in the state currently for STEAM accredited schools. H.B. Williams has just got their accreditation. They are the first K-2 school in the state to get STEM accreditation. We're really excited for them. But what we did is they were getting $10,000 that went for supplies, projects, materials, things like that. We put that money into our budget because it was pretty vital. It's a lot of work to get certified in STEM, and we don't want it just for the name. We want it because they're actually involving science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. We want them to be able to engage students in that engineering process and mindset because we think it's best for kids. And so we want it to have real value, and sometimes you got to have some supply money and other things to be able to do those things. Another big investment in this budget is Teach Sumner. The state of Tennessee, I'll let you on a little secret. I don't know if you know this or not, but colleges around the country and their ability to produce future teachers has collapsed. Almost every college of education has diminished in terms of graduates that want to teach. For instance, the state now allows us to certify teaching candidates. We are currently the number 1 undergraduate teaching certifier in the state of Tennessee. We passed the University of Tennessee. Schools that used to have 100, 150 future teachers now have 25 or 30. We had 48.8% of our new teachers last year were job embedded, which means teachers that didn't come with a teaching certificate before they arrived. We believe in the next 5 years that number will approach 85%. What we want to be able to do is provide this certification service to teachers without them having to take on debt. You can do job embedded right now. My daughter did this, but she had to go get a master's degree. So she immediately took on an extra 2 years of schooling and the student loan debt that comes with that. Trying to provide an option for people to come in and teach without picking up debt is a good thing for our county. If you look, this was our first graduating class of Teach Sumner. This was all, our initial cohort was for CTE. I'll give you some fun things. There is a retired Lieutenant Colonel Black Hawk pilot, West Point grad in the back there. There is a retired, you'll probably be able to pick this guy out. There's a retired New York City detective teaching criminal justice. He's in the second row. There is in the front row, there's a doctor of engineering that teaches mechatronics. There's a doctor of nursing that's teaching nursing. This is a really amazing cohort of educators, and we're getting them because they probably wouldn't have come and taught or stayed if they'd had to go back and take $20,000, $30,000 in debt on to get certified to teach. But they're retired in other areas, and they're wanting to come back and give. We actually have 3 retired NYPD detectives who live on the same street in Creekside. So if you're thinking about committing a crime, don't stay at Creekside. New teacher experience. Again, a lot of our work is how do we value the new teachers that we're getting and support them where they're not just thrown into the deep end of the pool and told to sink or swim. One of the things that we're doing this year is we're doing a new teacher launch, which will have it's a 3-day intensive where they learn about the school that they're going to be in and the county. The most important thing is we went ahead and invested in the technology, so they'll leave that day with their computer, all their logins, everything ready to go. So they're ready to roll in. Like when I started teaching in Atlanta in 1999, I got hired 3 days before school started. I was shown the copy machine. We got 50 copies a month. And I didn't know because the assistant principal just showed me his login. I didn't even know I had a login, so I just used his. I found out I got a whole lot more copies that month because there was no limit on his. There was on mine. They fixed that really, really quickly. but we're trying to support our teachers, our new teachers, so that they have a positive experience as they come into Sumner County schools. We are trying to limit student exposure, especially in K2, to devices. We think kids are on devices too much. We want there to be some presence of technology in the classroom for some center work and some creative purposes, but not as the primary way of delivering instruction. Kids need to actually hold books and read books and touch books. They need to be doing manipulatives with math, right? If you walk in an elementary classroom now, and when they're doing fractions or they're doing probability and statistics, you would realize immediately that you would have understood it better when you were in school had you been able to actually play with 5 different things and 3 of them are red and 2 of them are green. That makes a whole lot more sense to me than a worksheet with 35 problems on it. But we need kids doing that, not just stuck on devices. So we did this during COVID initially. We put 5 iPads in each K2 classroom. This is the replacement. Technology for students, I just shared that. Technology for teachers. 1,500 MacBook Airs. We're trying to get on a rotation. We have 2,600 teachers, we have 6,000 employees. We're trying to get on a rotation so we don't have to have a year where we buy like 4,000 devices, right? We found out during COVID, at the start of COVID in 2020, that we were not a mobile district when it came to technology. We had a lot of desktop hardwired computers. We made a rapid change first to Chromebooks and then a couple years ago to iPads. We're much more mobile now, but when we did that, we lifted what individual schools could afford. We can't shift this burden onto PTOs. The schools, I'll show you their funding in a little bit, but it makes more sense for us, for where we are now, for us to pay for this from the district because it's easier for our technology team to manage. It's more uniform. I mean, when I came to teach in Sumner County in 2009, I went to Walmart with a $300 budget that the English department had, and I bought a $286 e-machine that lasted about a month and a half, and then I used my laptop. The problem is if you got everybody using their own stuff, you don't have any security across the network. It makes it very hard. And then replacing our principals and assistant principals use their iPads probably more than they use laptops, because if they're in a classroom, they're doing evaluation, they're walking the building, and something happens, they can hop on their iPad and look at the cameras. They can get their emails, they can get their messages. It makes them much more connected because, the job of the principal, yes, it's instruction, but it's also to ensure that the school is safe and that everything is functioning properly, and that pulls at them a lot. We are piloting an AI tool called Course Mojo. We piloted it this year in 6th grade. We'll roll it to 6th to 8th grade next year. I'll skip over this now. I'd be happy to explain this to you after. It's really pretty amazing. It gives teachers almost instant feedback on where students' understanding of what they're reading is. It gives it for each individual student, it gives it for the class as a whole, provides them support for questioning, but also to understand where students are getting stuck. It's a pretty remarkable product, but I'll have to actually just probably show it to you. It's hard to pick it up on a slide. Student safety, you can see we trained 6,000 employees at Long Hollow Church back the day before spring break. The group that we partnered with that you can see on the stage there, they are amazing at helping teachers and staff feel confident in the event that there's a mass shooting event or tragic event. But you can also see that that's just one part of everything that we're doing to make sure that our kids are safe when they enter our schools. Including, we're like one of the first districts in Tennessee to be storm ready. Last year, if you remember, we had an incident where tornadoes came through in the Portland area at the end of the school day while we already had kids out on buses. That's the most terrifying thing. We're really safe when kids are in school. Schools are built to endure things like that. We're really safe most of the time when kids are at home with their parents. The real risk point, the trouble point for us is if kids are out, and we run buses in the afternoon from 2:15 until about 5:30. So that's a big window. That we can't book tornadoes. They come at all kinds of different times. And so being storm ready, the biggest thing is, and let me give a shout out to our first responders and law enforcement, is when I talk to other superintendents in other counties, in other states, I don't think I see the connection between the county mayor, our police, our sheriff's office, local police, EMS, EMA, everybody. When we had the bus wreck this year in Bethpage, between Bethpage and Westmoreland, Sheriff Craddock's there leading the kids up the hill to a new bus to take them to the point where we could reunify with parents. My team was there, county mayor was there, EMA, EMS, everybody's there just getting things taken care of. That's a huge blessing for the county. I don't take that lightly. It's a lot of great work. You can see some of the things that are in the budget. We've invested to this point about $1.8 million on window film and doorknobs and things like that to upgrade our overall security. We've got a major project going on at North Sumner right now. We've got to continue our investments in window film and doorknob replacement. We know the value of AEDs. This 100,000, we have multiple AEDs in each school. We have to replace those. You know, the most horrific thing is to have an AED and have it locked up or have it in a place where people can't access it. So we have mobile AEDs with our athletic trainers. We have AEDs in the school. We use these way more than you would imagine. Just like, you know, Narcan. We have Narcan in each school. We have a tourniquet in each school. We have an EpiPen in each school. Thankfully, we use the EpiPens the most. We haven't used a tourniquet yet, to my knowledge, but they're there if we need them. But, you know, we're trying to prepare in the event of any kind of emergency. Now to the number parts. All right, so this is what it looks like. This 25 TISA number has dropped by about $800,000 or $900,000 since last month when we made this slide. One of the frustrating things for me, I know when I talked to Mr. Becker, Mr. Schoaf, Mr. Long, is like, when are you going to have your final revenue? It's like somewhere around June 30th. We get the TISA number from the state. One of the things that I've asked the legislature to look at is they do a calculation in late April, early May, where they decide the percentage of local contribution. Last year it went up 0.3 and it cost us 1.3 million. This year it went up 0.3, it was about around $1 million that it increased our local contribution, which pulls out of the school system's share of the TISA. So the problem with that is we're about 95% done with our budget. When that happens, it would be great if we could lag that a year so we could budget for it, prepare for it. I'm trying to encourage our state legislators to look at that, and they've assured me that they will. But that's our TISA and county revenue numbers. So that's a $6 million increase from the county commission. Thank you. I appreciate the work that y'all have done to provide that. I know it's not easy. I know you have a bunch of different departments all asking for money with all really valid concerns. We don't take that lightly. On behalf of the school board, Sumner County Schools, thank you for the work that you've done to make that happen. And then right now, it's a little bit under $5 million that we're going to receive in TISA and other revenue. Okay, just wanted to show you a couple of the other things. I won't talk long here. These are some of the other big purchases or big items that you'll see in our budget, other than compensation. I wanted you to show, we fund each school, because I know sometimes you get questions about how do we fund schools, right? School supplies were one that was never meant to be a long-term solution. We had the ability to do that when we had ESSER money, and we thought that that would be a huge benefit for parents. We planned on doing it as long as we could. It's somewhere between $1.5 and $1.8 million a year to provide the school supplies. We have an abundance of school supplies in the school system, and we're not going to let any child, we've never let a child go without in Sumner County. We're going to make sure that they're covered. We've already talked to the United Way, and the churches are working on this, a lot of other groups, and then we have, through our Family Resource Center, we're going to work to make sure every kid has what they need. But schools do get instructional money, $75 per student. So they get $50 for instruction. This covers everything from technology, if they want to buy that, to dissect, like when I was a high school principal, we bought owl pellets, we bought sharks, we bought baby sharks, we bought frogs, all kinds of things to dissect. We bought chemistry supplies, we bought calculators. Everything that kids touch and use goes into that instruction money. $16 for the office, that goes for copy paper and things like that. $7.50 in the library for books and access to online tools, and then $1.50 for guidance for the supplies and materials that are needed in the guidance department. All right, so these are the new positions that we added this year. I'm happy to slow down. I'll just let you have a minute to look at it. What we try to think about is every position on here is pretty directly connected to improving outcomes for students. And so that's kind of how, we don't just add positions lightly. This is something that we do in order to either make us more efficient, more responsive, or to directly impact students. And then we try to find alternative money wherever we can. We've got a community support position that will be at Rucker Stewart this year to connect families to the school, to mentor kids, to coach students, and help help them stay on the right track and be ready to be successful in high school. That one's grant funded. Teach Sumner is partially grant funded, and then our prevention coordinator is partially grant funded. Okay. I know this to you too, Mr. Becker. Okay. All right, so Sumner County teacher pay. 2019, we were at $36,100. This year we'll be at, or for next year we'll be at $50,500. That's 1 year ahead of the governor's requirement that we be above $50,000, so we're a school year ahead. We will, of course, continue to have to push that up because if everybody in the state has to be at $50,000, we're going to have, because the cost of living here, we're going to have to be ahead of other counties. I wanted to kind of show you, I threw this in the slide deck, and I can certainly share this with everybody. I know this is kind of hard to see. This is the teacher pay scale for next year. I broke it down a little bit just so you could see. So if you have a bachelor's degree, you would start at $50,500. This is a question that we get a lot immediately after a budget presentation. Is about 10 years ago, 8 years ago, some districts started doing this gimmicky thing where they raised their starting teacher pay and got higher than everybody else, but then they paid you that same thing for 5 years. So they stake a gamble of getting you into the system that you would stay. This applies across the board at each level of the pay scale. I did not include, if you go back, I've got this on there. You can look it up here. If you look on the school board slide deck, I actually walked through for bachelor's, master's specialist, and then doctorate. Just to give you an idea of what this looks like for, if you were a first year teacher last year, so 24-25 was your first year teaching, you would have started at $47,800. Going into next year, you would receive the increase, right, to take everybody above $50,500 plus a step. So you would, your pay would go up 7.1% or about $3,300. If you've been a teacher for 10 years, these slides will be really helpful because these will be the questions you'll get if you talk to our teachers is, what does this mean for me? I'm a year 10 teacher, I'm a year 15 teacher, I'm a year 20 teacher. You can direct them to that pay scale, but sometimes it's easier just to have the numbers at your disposal. If you've been teaching for 10 years, it's a $3,800 increase, again, 7.1%. And then again, if you're a 20-year teacher, it's 7.1%, about $4,400. So the size of the raise is actually a little bit bigger as you go up the scale. And that's the way percentages work. And but I'm really thankful. Last year our team, Ms. Brown, Mr. Ott, did a tremendous job of smoothing out. Like if you've been around for Sumner County for a long time, we used to have a pay scale where the state contributed money. Mr. Rain, you'll remember this, and the county gave money. And so sometimes you would get a 2% state raise and a 5% county raise. But the 5% county raise would be on the smaller portion of the county pay. Mr. Sullivan, I'm sure you remember this. And then we had a pay scale that only went to year 19. So after year 19, you got no raises. And then they took it to 21 or 22, and then they took it to 24. The problem was is anywhere those breakpoints were, when we extended it, it got wonky. So like some year you would get a 3.5% raise on a step. In other years, you get a 1.2%. So last year, they smoothed all that out. So it's pretty consistent across the entire scale, which makes it a lot more equitable for people. It's hard to do. We did that last year because we lifted the overall level of teacher and classified staff compensation. All right, so to talk about, earlier I heard some very heartfelt comments about special education staffing. It's been hard the last 4 or 5 years. Ms. Dam is retiring in a few weeks after 41 years with Sumner County Schools. And Ms. Dam has given her heart and life to improve outcomes for special education students with disabilities. There's probably not another director in the state of Tennessee that knows almost every student in the district by name, that knows what they need and works tirelessly to get what they need. One of the problems that we faced is that there's a teacher shortage. There is a massive special education teacher shortage. And the federal government, where the state's giving us more and more leeway to get teachers certified, the federal government continues to lift the requirements to be a special education teacher, which makes it harder for us to get teachers, right? So we have a lot of people that are really passionate about students with disabilities that would be great special education teachers. We've made it harder for them to get there, and I'm hoping that those are walls that will continue to fall down because we want the very best to be with our kids. I will say last year we added we made a huge lift on our classified compensation. We went up $4 an hour last year. We also, for special education teachers, we added $10,000 to the teacher scale. Why? Because we didn't want to differentiate just on need. We wanted to differentiate on work. Every special education teacher teaches a full load of classes, plus they have a caseload to manage, and they are the primary touch point for for the families of our students with disabilities, and they do an extensive amount of extra work that they weren't being compensated for. So we added $10,000 to try to address the difference in the extra work that they were doing, but it's also made recruiting teachers so much easier. A couple years ago at this time, we had about 26, 27 special education teacher openings. Now we have 3. Okay, that's a huge difference from where we've been. We added a behavior class at Rucker Stewart Middle School this year, so we could have one at Rucker and one at Schaefer. That allows us to have fewer students in the classroom, and that makes it a lot easier for us to help support those students to be more successful. We filled the teacher and the 2 assistants in a week, which the last couple of years, that was almost impossible. So you can see, like, here are some of the things from our $4 pay increase last year. 2023, we had 2 applicants for a CDC assistant job at Station Camp. We had 28 this year, 13 for resource assistant at Nannyberry, custodian at White House Middle, office clerk at Portland. You can see a significant, like, the extra pay made a huge difference in our ability to recruit and retain employees. And last year was imperative that we increased our classified staff pay scale to attract more applicants. We had something like 58% of our classified staff was making on average $12.55 an hour, and we were asking them to do very mission critical jobs, and they could go to Chick-fil-A or McDonald's or anywhere and make significantly more money. We have closed the gap on that. Ideally, I think we need to get to 18, but what we wanted to do this year was give each classified staff person a raise of 2 steps on the pay scale. So they get a step. We try to give a step each year. So basically, like, I had hoped that we could get to 17, like take the minimum pay scale to 17 this year. Anytime, if you're on a budget, when you change the entire pay scale, you're committing yourself to pretty significant money in an ongoing fashion. What we've always tried to do is we don't try to offer raises if we can't pay it this year and next year, and the year after that, and the year after that. That's just not conservative governance, and that's not how we've done things in Sumner County over the last couple of decades. So what we could do, though, last year we raised the $4 because we needed to be able to recruit outside our current employees while also retaining our current employees. This year our move was to take care of our current employees because we were in the market. We're getting applicants, where before we were getting 0, 1, or 2 applicants. Now we're getting a good number of applicants for every job. So we feel pretty good about where we are with our starting pay. But for our people that are here, we want to reward them for being here. And so doing the 2 steps will on average work out. Last year they got $4 plus a step. This year they get 2 steps. That works out. So if you made $12 last year, you would be at $17, right at $17 this year. So that gets us up that extra $1 for the people that have been here. I know that's a lot of words. I can show you just a teaching assistant. This would be a 2-year increase for a teaching assistant of right at $5 or $7,000 increase. And you could see it went from $12 to $16.32, and then from $16.32 to $16.98 with the 2 steps. If you do that with a bus assistant, you can see some of these are a little different because buses, we had hit a real need for bus drivers and bus attendants a couple years ago, and we made some moves to address the inequities there. So they're getting a little bit less on the bus assistant because they'd already caught some of it previously. Head custodian at a large school went from $14.64 to $19.40 over 2 years. So this increase for this year is an increase in $13.8 million in increased compensation this year, and a 2-year run increased compensation of $42.7 million. If you want to know anything that I think the County Commission and the School Board can hang their hats on, this is historic, and it's completely changed the game for the great people that we already had, keeping the great people we already had in our school system, and attracting and retaining great people to come in. We have a lot of people each year that retire because they've been doing it because they love our school system. They've been doing it for a long time. We want to be able to put people in those positions that love it just as much, that will carry us through the next 30 or 40 years. I'll tell you a funny story. Our bus drivers, we had one that considered retiring, and the response was, she only has 32 years. she's kind of just getting started. Because most of our bus drivers drive 40, 45 years. It's an amazing thing. If you talk to anybody, especially in our rural communities, they know and love their bus driver. And they know and love every teaching assistant, everybody else that works with them. So this is a pretty historic move that I'm really proud of. And that's not me. That's all of us working together to do this. So thank you so much. Yes, sir.
So I just want to, can you go back 2 slides? So, going forward, to the 30, so 13.8 increased compensation, that is, this is recurring 13.8, almost 14 million. And this year, you had a total of new additional recurring revenue around, just shy of 12 million, it looks like. Or,
Yes.
excuse me, 12,704,096. So, yeah, I just got to do my diligence here.
Yeah.
I believe with that maybe some arguments that increased funding isn't going toward teachers and staff. If I look at that, more than every dollar of new recurring funding is going to staff. So that's a good thing, but it's also spending more than you're getting extra. So if you could maybe just speak to that.
Yeah, I think it is a concern that I think we're all facing. I think y'all have faced the same pressures, which is, we've caught an inflation over the last couple of years that wasn't primarily driven by just the cost of materials and supplies. It was in keeping and retaining workers, or else we just don't have them. I think that's been across industries, and we've had to, I know y'all spent extensive time last year looking at your pay, and I'm sure did the same thing this year. And, we did the same thing. It's like we have to get in, we don't have custodians if we pay less than what we're paying. And we ran that. We had principals that were also serving as their head custodian. The principal at Gallatin High School, our largest high school, was running the cash register in the cafeteria. We don't have as many of those problem numbers we've been able to staff. So yes, I mean, it's a concern. I think it's a valid concern. But I think also, I think we've made the big lifts. We've gotten ahead of where we needed to be from the governor's requirement over the 50,000. We've moved ourselves on our classified staff up to where we're competitive with the surrounding market. And we now just have to kind of monitor. What I would like to do, we did this before because I know about 13 years ago, almost everybody in the school system that was a classified person was making close to minimum wage, even if they'd been in the district for 30 years. And what we did then is we took groups of employees and we rotated around. And so everybody got a step increase, but then this group of employees got $1. And then as we had more revenue coming in, we did it with everybody because it's a lot easier for them to manage pay scales and everything if it's uniform across as opposed to lifting certain ones up. But, based on the economy, I think we all know that going into next year's budget, we're going to have a lot of hard questions to ask and answer. And I will say one of the biggest advantages that we had this year, Mr. Shove, was you and Mr. Long giving us our revenue numbers like in February or March, whenever it was. That was really helpful in us being able to build our budget. And, we were actually talking today in our staff meeting about what can we do to start things earlier so that we can engage y'all in that work to see what we're looking at earlier. I think we can follow suit. I don't know if that answers your question.
No, it does. I guess I'll follow up with another question. And by the way, we went through this last year heavily. This year was a little bit easier. I think that's been a little bit easier. Last year, you look at the numbers, 30%, 40%. Think, oh, that's huge. But then when you look at the raw, when you're starting at $12.50 an hour, 40% is not that much. So I absolutely agree with the need to move particularly classified staff up.
Yeah.
And I have no questions about that in its merits. I'm just doing my diligence here. Mm-hmm. Are you at all concerned about, let me take a step back and give some context, because I don't comment much on social media, but I've been reading, and I know that there are concerns about, is the school system building their reserves? Are they overbuilding? I'm looking at your budget here. I can't speak to years and years in the past. I'm looking at this budget and I actually think I might start to have the opposite concern getting close to running at a deficit. And so just as in a general, as an overall statement, if you were to aggregate all of your recurring funds and look at your recurring expenditures, are you concerned about a deficit situation this year, the next year, the year after that?
Yeah, I think first thing let me address, thank you for cueing me about the reserves. It's a fascinating feature of social media that you can be accused of spending too much money and saving too much money at the same time. Since we both started at West Point, I was at one point after basic training, I lost 60 pounds during basic training, but I was still over the Army height weight standard. So I got taped for being fat at the same time I had to drink Ensure shakes for being too skinny. It's a little bit like that at times. Our reserves work like this. When you see the comptroller's report that throws out this number about what our reserves are, that includes everything that's in the school system. So it includes our health insurance trust, which we have to keep. We have 6,000 employees. I don't know how many are actually on our insurance, but it's several thousand, 3,000 or 4,000 people are on our insurance, right? So we have to keep a reserve. I remember, I think it was my third or fourth meeting when I was on the commission. They came in and they said, you can do anything you want on the budget committee, but if you don't move 3 or 4, do you remember this, Mr. Long? If you don't move like $3.5 million into the insurance trust, your employees are not going to have insurance next month. And we said, can we have time to talk about it? And they said, oh no, it depends on if you want insurance next month for your employees. We have to keep that reserve healthy to make sure that we can take care of our employees, because we're self-insured, which saves us a ton of money. We are, 2 of the last 3 years, we've done no increase to our employees on their insurance, because we've done a tremendous job of managing it. Last year we were able to do a 2-month holiday around the holidays where people that are on our insurance didn't have to pay their premium for those months because of the state of our reserves. But that money we can't touch because it's pigeonholed just for health insurance or medical insurance. There are other things, like for instance, like you saw earlier, where we have money at each school, and you'll have like a quarterback club or a band booster in a high school. They might have $50,000, $60,000 in the bank because they're saving to purchase a mower, they're saving to do something. So what we don't do is we don't collect all those funds from the school at the end of the year and roll them into a general account. They stay because a lot of times parents and other community people have given that money to the school for Gallatin High School Theater, Henderson High School Soccer, Station Camp Band or something like that. That money was given for that purpose. So a lot of those funds that are in the reserve are for that. I think the biggest concern that I have is we have typically tried to manage in such a way. In fact, I'll just share a little anecdote this morning. Ms. Brown chastised my whole team about not turning in something incorrectly, because we're not like, when I was in the federal government and we would try to burn down whatever money we had at the end of the budget year so that it would get replenished by Congress. We do the exact opposite. We try to hold on to every dollar. So historically, we've tried to run around 93% budget to actual. The only concern, to your point about the reserves, the only concern I have about that this year is the increased pay has led to us having a lot more staff that we haven't had historically. So we're going to need to see around August, September, what our actual reserve numbers are going to come in this year. We feel good with where they're trending. Because again, 93 is the sweet spot for us, because we don't want to get up to that, 97. I think, I say from my time with working with Mr. Long, we've always tried to budget conservatively on revenue projections, but then also spend conservatively on what we do so that we don't ever hit, I know there have been times in the past where we budgeted money hoping we would get it from the state. And that's a bad place to be in. So I share that concern. I do think that, there's always things like, for instance, if you take capital, we've spent a tremendous amount of money, reserve money on capital the last couple of years, the athletic facility projects. We're hitting a place now where capital projects are so expensive, prices are all over the place. We're probably going to hit a little bit of a lull on capital spending for a while, just because it's hard to, it doesn't make sense unless we absolutely have to do it at a time when the prices for steel and aluminum and things like that are astronomically high. So I don't know if that answers your question.
It does partially. So I guess yes, but just maybe state another way. Let me paraphrase. You do share some concerns about potentially going up from 93 to 95%. ticking up. So right now, you try to sit there at 93% burn.
Yeah.
You have some concerns about that going up, but really you're going to wait out till the end of this year to see how it plays out.
We just don't know until we get through, in 2 weeks we'll close our books, but that takes about a month to do. And then we have to go through the process with the comptroller to get everything certified. And we'll have a better picture in August or September. I would say that's one concern. Another concern is I do think that we have a problem. I don't know how to get at this. We can't see under the hood for how this local contribution is calculated. And I understood because last year when we went up 0.3 on the local contribution, it made sense because it was just kind of set in the sky 2 years ago when they started, 3 years ago when they started TISA, and they just kind of guessed. And we all knew, like when we look at our tax appraisals and everything else, our appraisals, property appraisals went up 76% over a 5-year run. We knew that we would catch some increase there. I don't understand how we caught another 0.3 increase this year when, we haven't stopped growing, but growth has slowed down in Sumner County in terms of we, at least for the schools, we don't see the increase in our student population that we did 5 or 10 years ago. So I don't understand how we went. I don't think property appreciation has gone up at the same rate that it was going from, say, 2019 to 2024. I have already talked to our legislators and asked for some insight into how CTAS and TASER is calculating that number. I think it would be really helpful if they would lag that, so as I mentioned earlier, so we could plan ahead. It'd be nice to know if we're going to lose $1 million at the end of the year, that we can account for that in the front end instead of it eating out of our reserves. I will tell you that we have been very strict on our reserve funds this year. We plan on being more strict next year because I do think, my goal is always to try to come over here and, we've done this for a long time. Whatever revenue we get from the state and county, that's what we're going to budget. I hope to never. I don't think it was ever, let me say this, I think the previous superintendents did everything they could to try to do what was best. I think the previous county commissions and school boards did. It's just sometimes, the county was changing. There are a lot of needs always, and how do we do it? But I think what we've proven over the last 2 years is that we can always sit around the table and work through whatever challenge we have. So yes, I have the concern about our burn rate. I have a concern about the local contribution piece at the state. And then, I have another concern just based on what I think everybody has, which is what's the overall economy going to do in the next year? Because, when we look at a significant amount of ours at the state level coming from sales tax, and then at the local level, on the school side, a lot of ours coming from sales tax. It's great because sales tax has been really good to us over the last 10 years. And this is not a criticism at all. It's just a reality of what do we do if we catch a dip in that. I do think that, we've got, and I know with Mr. Long's retirement coming up, that's a big transition for the county, but I do think that we've got the people to kind of work together to always be, and I would commend y'all, because I think we've all worked very transparently over the last 2 years to kind of get to really common sense conclusions, and that's from our side, that's what we would pledge. I wish I had an extra $120 million in reserve. If we did, I would share, but, we don't.
Thank you. Please, Mr. Harrison, you have a question.
Thank you, Chairman Shuffle. First of all, Dr. Langford, thank you for your presentation and thank you for your commitment to the investment in the future innovation of our school system. I guess harkening back to statements that were made in the public comments, and certainly I will say for myself, I consider myself extremely fortunate and blessed that never have had to face what these parents are having to face, obviously, on a daily basis. I'm certainly blessed by the good Lord. Can you talk a little bit about some of these concerns and what you see as far as when you and I talk about ratios and things like that?
Yeah.
Can you address those issues, please?
Yeah, I think it's the hardest thing in our work because I think every parent concern for their child is valid and should be expressed. It's why, it's why we all ran for office, because we wanted to do good for the community, and that requires listening to everybody, even at times if I wouldn't even say we disagree. maybe the pathway, how we get there. I think that, for us, and I think the hard part for us is we have to do things that are equitable and fair. The state assesses us based on, are we being equitable and fair across schools? They pull random schools and then they compare them. A couple years ago, we got pulled in because they compared Westmoreland Elementary. They always compare Westmoreland Elementary and Indian Lake Elementary. And they look at those two. And as long as Westmoreland Elementary has more staffing, we're fine. But if Indian Lake has more, then it's an issue. So we do have to be aware, and we have done that pretty consistently over the last 10 or 15 years to say, what do the ratios show us instead of just adding a teacher or a staff person? We are trying to look at it and say, no, that's on the regular ed side. We are trying to look and say, what are the needs that we can better address to, but we have to do that in a way where we develop some criteria so that it's fair to everybody, right? Because otherwise you end up with, extra assistant principals, extra teachers, things like that. Now for special education, it's different because we look at not only the number, because I think you hit this very well, is not every one is the same. What I discovered when I was director of instruction, and Ms. Dam and I were working together, is I had to go to work every day in instruction thinking about the 30,000 students. Ms. Dam had to go to work every day thinking about the number of special education students that she had, because she had to look at each student individually and say, these are the services that they need. And I think that they do a tremendous job of that. But we still try to operate in ways that are fair and equitable. And so, for instance, I always hate when we lose a good person at the school level. It's the worst part of my job whenever I've done that as an assistant principal, director of instruction, or superintendent. But just looking at the numbers, last year we had 4 adults in the classroom, a teacher and 3 assistants for 7 students. Next year we're going to have 3.5 adults for 5 students. Okay, what we do though is we want to look at that, because sometimes, like, if a 6th kid enrolls in that class or a 7th child, it completely changes the dynamics of the way that we staff. So there's always a time in the summer right now where we try to get it right now, but I can tell you that Ms. Dam spends about 11 and a half months a year trying to get the staffing and the numbers right, because we don't just take kids once a year. We have children that move in and move out all the time. And so, like this year, we had a child that had a sign language assistant their entire school career where they graduated. So now we don't have anybody in that area that needs sign language. So unfortunately, that's a position that we have to RIF. I would love to keep everybody forever, but that's not feasible because I have to answer to the taxpayers and say this is where we are. I think every concern that they have raised is incredibly valid, and we want to always try to meet those needs. And we look at it, so it's not like a ratio is a snapshot in time. And if that ratio changes, and it's not just the number of adults to students, right? Because technically, we now have more resources in the classroom than we did last year. But the question is, when you're feeling it, and I think especially our special ed community in the classroom is very close-knit. They develop, because the people that are working with your child are not just teachers and educators. They become almost like members of the family, right? Because they see the great days where we laugh and celebrate, and they see the really challenging days, and everywhere in between. And everybody that I've ever known that's a long-term special education employee has such a heart and passion for kids. And so I think everything that they've shared is valid. I think the same thing is true for playgrounds. The $250,000 that we committed in next year's budget for capital is a starting point. It's not an ending point, right? If you look at last month's school board presentation, we went through the 16 schools that have students next year that are in a wheelchair or have limited mobility. Because what we wanted to do is what can we look at those 16 schools where these students will attend school? What can we do to make it better while we try to develop a long-term plan? Because I personally think it's an incredible goal for us to look to make every playground at every elementary school in Sumner County accessible to a way so that all kids can enjoy it. That is probably a $25 to $35 million investment, and we're not going to get there overnight. So my thoughts are we need to start with where we currently have kids and then work out. And whenever we build a school in the future, whenever we do a capital project, something like that, we catch a couple more playgrounds, but we create a list. My proposal has been that we do exactly like what we did with athletic facilities, except I think we'll do it better because we learned a lot when we did that. I think that what we can do is I think we're at our best when we get parents, teachers, community leaders, everybody involved to look at our current playgrounds, address the needs, and then put together a plan, because I do think that there is corporate sponsorship. I think that we're going to get better at writing grants, and it's not that I want that to be the only source of money, but I think that's a part where we can go faster. We can take the dollars that we have and multiply those by adding to that. And I think that's a responsible way for us to address it. It doesn't remove the need, and I appreciate the fact that we're going to have parents that want to hold us accountable for that, because I do think that's important. And I think that their voice is very valid. I look forward to hearing their input as we move a little closer, but to get into that $250,000, we have to pass our budget for us to be able to begin some of that process. What we're trying to do this summer, for instance, one of the speakers earlier has a student at one of our elementary schools where their child will be new to that school. And there are some very real needs. I was thinking when I saw I need to ride by and look at that elementary school, because there was supposed to be some stuff done to make it more accessible. A lot of the problems that we're hitting is how do we get pathways, right? That's something we can work on now. Building sidewalks and different things like that. We are actually at the Gallatin Early Learning Center, the pre-K that we're building. One of the things that's most expensive about a more accessible playground experience is the material on the ground, right? Because mulch is awful when you're talking about accessibility. If you just lay down, I can't think of what they're called, they're like in barns, they got the holes in them. Yeah. If you have somebody go out there and sweep the mulch off or blow it off or whatever, it's a little better. It's not perfect. Station Camp Elementary put down a field turf that's not like field turf on a football field. It's really soft and it's good, but the problem is it's good for rolling around on. It's much harder if you're trying to push a wheelchair across it. So, we're trying a new surface that's significantly more affordable than what you see at like Mary's Magical Playground, something like that. But I'd like to see that and see kids use it, before we commit a lot of resource to it, because I want to make sure it's not, because a couple years ago putting the tracking down on top of the mulch was what we thought might be a better solution. And they were operating with very limited funding. Some of our schools, the playgrounds were built prior to the Americans with Disability Act. So it is a need, but it's going to require a lot of work over several years to get there. I think we're all committed to that work, but we got to do it in a way that's where we can commit to do it over and over so that we can get there. And I think we've done that with safety, whether that was SROs or school enhancements. We've done it in health athletic facilities, and I would say this is the next big thing that we need to look at and work on.
Just one more follow-up to that, and I'll give the floor. When you're talking about $25 to $35 million investment, that's between 20 and 25 cents, if I've done the math right, on your tax rate. So we can raise taxes and do pretty much whatever we want to do, but trying to be conservative about this and build it long-term over the course of time. And I know that doesn't answer immediate questions now for parents or certain students, but just to kind of put it in context.
Yeah. And that would be if we did everything at once.
Exactly.
That would be like turnkey.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, and I've never heard that from anybody. Like everybody, I think the parents that I've talked to are very reasonable about how we move forward. It's just wanting to see the sense of urgency to move forward and do some things. And I think that's very valid.
Langford, I have two questions. I just am trying to understand this. I've been keeping track of enrollment since the year 2000, and in 2014 we had 28,500 students, and this year we had about 30,426. And additionally, in 23 and 24, and in 25, it was all right around 30,400. Now, we're adding staff, a substantial amount of staff. When our enrollment is basically flat, can you explain to me why we need more staff?
Yeah, I think a lot of that, if you look, especially some of those earlier years, is when we opened the Liberty Creek campus. And so when you open a school, you know, we moved a lot of staff, but then you have to also add staff. There's certain things you have to have at every school, regardless of size. So, excuse me, we did that because when we first caught the wave of growth, the big wave of growth, say 2014 through 21, 22, or right before COVID, we had some things like at one point, Station Camp High School was running around 1,800. We moved kids around Beach, jumped up to about 1,600. So we opened Liberty Creek to address the long-term growth needs that we have in the county. In addition to, you know, we added White House Intermediate. You know, in a way, you know, we've invested, and I think you can see that increased staffing has decreased. You know, we added less staff. We tried to address things because Sumner County, there's a couple different, there's not one single answer for that. Some of that is we open new schools and that requires more staffing. Some of that is that we had a philosophy for many decades that we stayed as lean as humanly possible. And we did that well, but I mean, if you go to most districts, every elementary school has an assistant principal. We added 5 assistant principals this year, and that was to get some of our elementary schools between 400 and 500 an assistant principal, because what we're seeing now is, you know, on the work side is the number of, if you take the number of students with a 504 or an IEP or student behavior, those numbers have increased dramatically over that same time period. And so if you're in an elementary school without an assistant principal, especially in that 400 to 500, our principals are sometimes doing a day and a half of just meetings every week. And so we've had to add some staffing to do that. Other things, you know, is I think at a certain point you just reach critical mass, especially post-COVID, where the workload that was on a lot of our people was more intense than could be sustained without adding staff. So I think there's new schools. I think there's increased work based on a changing student population. You know, as we talked about earlier with special education, accounting for assistants in the classroom and things like that, it's very different when you're talking about, you know, for instance, if you take like 1 year during COVID, we had around 1,200 new students. Now, that was offset by some that left, so it wasn't like an increase of 1,200. But we had kids that came to us from all over the country. You know, our schools, we were in school in elementary school 93% of the time during COVID. High schools and middle schools were in 87% of the time. We had a significant number of people move in from California, New York, Illinois. They were out of school sometimes for 18 months. So the kids coming in had a profoundly different set of needs that requires, you know, different sets of support.
Yeah, well, you know, you mentioned Station Camp, and Station Camp peaked at 1,141 this year, and they've been, in 2022, they're about 1,330, and then they dropped to 1,111. I'm assuming that had something to do with Liberty Creek.
It did, but if you went back to around 2017, you would see 2016, 17, 18, you would see a significant larger number of Station Camp high school.
You're right, it was 1767.
Yeah, and then we shifted some to Beach while we were working on Liberty Creek, and then Beach jumped up to like 1,600. Now the only school that we have over 1,650 is Gallatin High School.
Yeah, they're still pretty high. But overall, in a county that has increased probably from 160,000 to over 200,000 in the same amount of time, our student enrollment has only increased about 2,000. And so I'm still having trouble. I understand that maybe behavioral problems is requiring more teachers per student than would have been, and I don't know what you do about that. But I'm just here again. I'm the advocate for my District 6.
Sure.
Doing everything I can to keep property taxes down.
Yeah.
And so I'm looking and saying, it seems like we continue to add staff, but we're not adding students.
Right. Yeah, and I would say, let me be clear, like I was throwing out a couple examples. That's not all of it. That's just a couple of examples. I don't want to make it sound like because we've got a whole lot of special education students, behaviors, that's why we need to add more staff. I think what we're trying to do is add staff to make our staff more responsive to the needs of our parents and families. And that's been across the board. We did have for about 20 or 30 years a policy where we stayed as lean as humanly possible. And, in addition to an increase of, say, 2,000, 2,500 students over that time that you referenced, we also had significant increases in what's expected of us in accountability from the state and federal government, different things like that. We've added people like school safety. We've added, entire staffs to do stuff that wasn't part of what was required of schooling 10 or 15 years ago.
Yeah.
So I think that's, there's not a silver bullet. It's like this and this and this and this and this.
Yeah,
So,
I'm sure it's an amalgamation of everything. Well, my second question is the night that this commission approved $6 million to increase your MOE, that same night, one of the school board members said that $17 million was put back in the reserve fund. Can you explain that? Or?
if it's the school board member that I think,
Yes.
I don't think they understand the way that reserves work. I don't think that they understand that, like when we have reserve at the end of the year, she forecasts that money, so we re-budget it. We don't have, I think there's some misconception that if we have 17 million left at the end of the year, that we take that money and put it back in, we don't put that in a bank account and hold it. We've already budgeted that. Now, I will say that there will always be money from the time that we close our books until we get the comptroller's report in September. Because as I mentioned, we try to run 93%. Last year we were lower than 93% because if you saw a lot of large school districts like Metro, Shelby County, others, they held on to a lot of their ESSER money and then were shocked when President Trump pulled it all back. We spent all of our ESSER money on the deadline that they gave us, which was last September, because we wanted to make sure that we didn't waste any of it or burn any of it. But one of the ways that we did that was last year, we moved everything that we could for that 1 year. We caught it out of ESSER to spend down the federal money so that we didn't waste it and to lift that off of the county. So we caught that money to roll, to Mr. Schoaf's question earlier, any money that we can catch through another source, through a grant to the state, through the feds, we're going to do that every year because that takes a Sumner County dollar and puts it back into play for the following year. And, for your District 6 constituents, makes it a whole lot easier for us to manage things moving forward so that we don't have to raise taxes.
But it stays within the school
yes, sir.
Money control, right?
Yes, sir.
And so, if I'm correct, I'm understanding that all told, and I understand you have several reserve accounts, but we're at about 143 million now?
Not in money that we can touch. That's including the health insurance trust. That's including money that's allocated at the schools for everything from football to cosmetology to everything. We don't pull all the schools' funding back at the end of the year. Their instructional dollars stay there with them. The money that they raise for football, the money that they raise for theater, it stays there. So it's a substantial amount of money in that reserve that the comptroller, that's not money that we can touch. Like, I can't remember all the numbers, but when I came over here last year to ask to move the $15 million out of reserve into our capital account, if you remember, I think I shared with you, we had about $55–60 million that we felt confident that we could pull out while still maintaining the comptroller asking us to keep 2 months of operating expenses beyond that money that we have to hold back every year. So that reserve, then I think that's the question Mr. Schoaf was asking me, that reserve number, what's our actual that we look at as our reserve, is diminishing because I think all of us have been, over the last couple of years, trying to manage things so that we don't have to raise taxes by, living within our means, but also where needed, burning down our reserves a little bit. And I think that what we've done is we actually, we built those reserves knowing that we would have some times like this where we needed to burn some of that down. That's why you build the reserves, to get us through stretches. And I think that's kind of that's the purpose of them. And I think we've all done that pretty successfully to the benefit of Sumner County taxpayers.
Yeah, a couple things. One, more discussion and answers, or the questions. To address what Mr. Klein asked about, I remember the days at one point in all, when I was teaching that long ago, they had half a day, and they had part-time ESL teacher, ELL teacher. Right now they have 3.5 ELL teachers.
Yeah. English language learner. So, thank you, Mr. Ring.
And that's happened at every school in this county. They double or triple the number of ELL teachers.
Yeah, we've gone from when I came up to take over instruction, I had EL as part of my responsibility. We had 16 EL teachers. We had about 600 EL students. Now we're at I want to say 51 EL teachers. So before, like the federal government, we have a tested subgroup if there's over 10 kids. 2018, I think we had 10 or 15 schools total that had a tested population in EL, and now every school, I believe, has that. So we have to provide that service. That would be another one. Thank you, Mr. Ring. I didn't include that, but that would be another one of those. I mean, if you go from 16 to 51, let's say, that's a huge increase in staffing and expenditure just there.
And another comment I wanted to make was, 8 years ago, whatever it was, I was talking to some of the staff at Gallup High School. We had a long-time employee who, after she got her, when she got her paycheck, after all deductions were made, was about $500 a month. Full time, she'd been there for a year, so it was about $500 a month after all deductions. Because you get even though school's only essential for 10 months, you get your paycheck over 12 months. So yeah, she's getting about a little over $500 a month. Third comment is, I think Mr. Sullivan and I retired too early.
Mr. Sullivan, I offered
a whole lot more money if we stuck around a few more years.
I have offered Mr. Sullivan a job every year. I am waiting.
Yeah, thank you. I've been on this my third year of education. And I know that I voted to fund a few positions with ARPA money. And I'm sure it passed commission. With these new positions that you've added, have you rolled any of those ARPA positions into the recurring, so they're all funded, they'll be funded after 26 now?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. We tried, any position that we created in ESSER, we didn't create it unless we planned on keeping it, because what we didn't want to do is hire somebody for a year or two and then say, position's gone. If we created that position to be funded by ESSER, that's something that we planned on eventually. And we started, maybe about 3 years ago, we started moving those over. Last year, we caught the majority. We caught a lot of special education. Part of some of it, and Mr. Klein, this goes to your question too, part of some of that is they set the funding formula for special ed about 1975, and they've never fully funded it at Washington. And so as we've raised salaries, each year more of Ms. Dam's teaching staff comes over from federal programs that you don't see reflected in this budget, comes over into the general side, because we have, I mean, it's not just that we have to provide it, we want to provide those services, but we have to also pay for it, and we have to, when we increase pay so that we could have special education teachers, it created the need to move a significant number of jobs over out of the special education federal budget into our GP budget. So that's another, I didn't think about that. I'll think of about 5 more. I may email you, Mr. Klein. I think it's some work.
First off, I want to thank you, because a little over 2 years ago, I stood up here pounding my fist on the desk about a school on the north end of this county. You made a promise to me, and I appreciate you keeping that promise.
Yes, sir.
I hope it's done by the time school starts back.
Both of us. It should be.
But they are working on it. Number 2, thank you for your service. I don't know if they didn't have child labor laws back then. You started in 10, but I appreciate your service. Number 3, we have some concerned parents here, and I understand their concerns. They want their children taken care of. I know it's not done yet, budget-wise and everything else. And if there's anything that you can possibly do to help these folks out, I would appreciate another promise,
yes, sir.
If you don't mind.
No, I will always do everything we can to take care of every child. I mean, I'll just be honest, I have to be fair and equitable across the entire county.
I totally understand that.
And, but I do want to, I mean, I understand every word and every concern, and I want to say it's very valid. At the same time, I do have to try to be fair with what we have. And
school supplies. I've had a lot of people calling about those, of course. We are probably, not necessarily my district, but part of my district, but especially in the Westmoreland district, probably one of the most rural, poorest areas of the county. These people will be getting help for their school supplies, right?
Yes, sir. So we have our Family Resource Center has already started. We have some residual, like, you know, when we did this the first year, it was like Model T forward. Like, here are your school supplies delivered to the school. We gave everybody the same thing. After that year, we learned to get a little bit more nuanced, and so principals went on there and met with their teachers and picked the stuff that they wanted off of a list. So, but even with that, principals did a good job of managing that, so we didn't have a bunch of extra stuff. We still have extra stuff, right? Like, we try to never run a deficit of pencils and stuff like that because we know we're going to need it. Our Family Resource Center works to get donations. United Way is bringing back the Stuff the Bus campaign that they used to do every year. I know I've talked to a number of churches. They're going to do drives. We are not, schools get instructional money for this purpose. I think the thing is that, you know, it's a twofold managing process. Is one, I think communicating to parents where they can go if they have help or if they need help. And I think two, creating a system where we don't have teachers, which is what we tried to get away from when we started allocating instructional funds. We don't want teachers to have to start buying these things out of their own pocket. Our schools have instructional money. And we need to talk, if our help center hits a place where they've given out all their budget of school supplies and there's nothing else coming in, we'll move money to meet the needs for students. I mean, obviously we got to have pencils and stuff like that. You know, one of the things that we have seen over the last couple of years with the iPads is that middle schools are using a whole lot less school supplies than what we thought, because we're moving away from, you know, a lot of extra paper and stuff like that. And God knows, if we could move away from worksheets completely, that would be a huge win. That's a long-term goal.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Beck.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you for giving us all that good explanation and so forth. Definitely some questions, but one of the things that I had a question on right now, at least, was related to, I think, related to the Brown Technology Endowment. You had listed, I'm looking through the sheet right now, you had listed technology for students, 1,800 iPads, 1,500 MacBook, 200 iPads for the leaders. Is all of that coming out of the Brown Technology Endowment?
No, there's not enough money in there to do that. So what we are doing is kind of a hybrid approach. Like in the past, so yeah, I mentioned what I got when I started teaching. Sumner County just, I mean, we were funded, and, you know, for Mr. Bills and Mr. Hyde in those years, you know, we were trying to run buses and buy books and stuff like that. They did the best they could. When Dr. Phillips came, he put in a district device fund, Amanda, in 2016, I think, 15 or 16. And that gave an allocation to each school. Like, for instance, I was principal at White House. We had about 825 students. I got about $19,000 a year to buy technology. Usually in those days, that would give me 3 Chromebook cards or 2 Chromebook cards and replacement computers for my teachers. And then if I wanted extra, I spent it out of the instructional money that I got from the county. What we found during COVID, and then when we got the Brown Trust, we would get an allocation, similar fashion that would match that. So some years, you know, it might be, if it had been 19 before, it might be 32, 33, something like that. But the problem that we're running into is the volume with which we bought. You know, what we discovered with student iPads is it's way cheaper if we manage that from the center. And so what I think is healthy for a district our size is to take the purchase of student devices and staff devices off the local school. So that will mean that we're going to use some of the Brown Trust money to fund that, but at the same time, and then what that does is it frees that money up for the local school to buy technology things for their school, whether that's like, you know, the iPad really takes a lot of needs off with students and teachers having those, because you don't have to have, used to you had to have this Elmo thing where you could put a document under it, and we brought, like, you can do that with an iPad easier while you're moving. So where we are, you know, like, we're not doing those, like, if you've ever been a PTO 10 years ago, I'm sure you remember this, we bought those interactive whiteboards and stuff like that that were proprietary and expensive. If you get a panel like that and an Apple TV for $99 and an iPad, you basically got the same setup that the teacher can move around the room. And so technology's gotten a little cheaper in that regard, but what it does is what we're trying to do is shift that money, their instructional money and the Brown Trust money formula that they'll get, to where they can buy things that are more one-off things and not things where they're having to try to spend their technology money plus their Brown Trust money plus their instructional money to replace teacher devices and student devices. That's the goal of lifting that up.
And I guess staying on the Brown technology and endowment, I'm sure it's somewhere in here, but what is the amount from the Brown technology endowment that's funded in this budget? Very last page.
It's the very last section.
Oh.
It's,
The last section.
Very last section.
The bottom is the very last section. And so we're only allowed to, budget, we only budget our reserve, because I'm never gonna spend an anticipated amount of revenue on that, so we always close in and estimate a reserve, budget that reserve, and then next year's revenue will fund that, and then that will be budgeted next year. So the 250 is what we expect to be at the end of this year in that reserve for the revenue we receive, and then that's the budget again.
And I would think that, oh, sorry.
To make sure I understand, so 250, so you, sounds like, from what I understand, or what I heard, is that the 250 was sort of banked up this year to use next year, and then whatever's banked up this, okay. The number 250, and again, that does seem decently lower than when we first set up the Brown endowment.
A lot of that's because we had a little bit of a run with Vanguard. It was impossible to get them to change it from Dale Phillips and Anthony Holt to Scott Langford and John Isbell. So I think we'll have, for next year, we'll have a better picture because we haven't been able to pull money out of it for like 2 years. So we'll have a better idea of what that money will look like.
Okay.
And what's the 150?
So 150 says we anticipated, I do not know how much we will get from Vanguard. That is the anticipated potential revenue that we will receive next year once that check is written. But we won't budget that until next year once we receive it and know that it's at final number.
Okay, so you haven't received it yet.
For next year, it will be what we're anticipating receiving the next fiscal year would be approximately 150. That's just kind of based on trend. We obviously hope it's higher. Hopefully our investments do well.
Before, so my district, within my district, the Indian Lake Elementary is there, and I think I had contacted you with some questions from constituents that I had. The assistant principal there was retiring, and that you all were choosing not to backfill that spot there. So removed an assistant principal away from Indian Lake Elementary. And you explained to me the formula and so forth that you use. And so I just wanted to try, I guess, ask again, what is the current, I guess it may be different for middle schools and high schools, but for elementary schools, what is the threshold that currently sort of requires or suggests to have an assistant principal versus not?
It's usually been over 500.
Okay.
We've had some bad years for childbearing in the peninsula, and so we've gotten down to about 460, 470 in there. So we need some more babies. But I think that's, but I mean, part of that is just like communities go through this when a group ages up and then parents stay there in their 50s and then they downsize and move out and new people move in. You know, I think it's starting to happen in Indian Lake. I'm hoping that will uptick, but like where we are right now, what we did this year is, where we've been forever has been 500. What we did this year was look at it and say, if you're under 500 and you have some combination of 2 or more pre-K, CDC, behavior, because those are usually coming, like for instance, a special ed pre-K adds about 15 to 20 students with IEPs, and that's 3 meetings a year for each of those kids. The same thing for 504s a lot of times, and then the behavior classes require, especially in elementary, require a significant amount. So we tried to look at it at the 500 point per ratio. If we went below that, it was because they had some combination of difficult, additional, hard to staff. If you ask me, like, I would hope if the revenue comes in next year, what I would hope to do is be able to drop that AP number to 400 for elementary school or 450, which would then put Indian Lake back in there. Because I think every elementary school needs an assistant principal, except maybe our small, like Oakmont probably okay. But the others pretty much need that, and that's a goal for us to hit. We have some of the similar things, like, for instance, like, you get into middle school, you got Station Camp Middle School with close to 1,000 and 2 APs, and the middle schools with 700 or 800 with 2 APs. So, we have to constantly try to evaluate what our ratios are based on the student population and needs, and I think that's definitely something we need to get more nuanced about. Our big goal needs to be not to Mr. Klein's point, not to just keep adding staff, but it's like trying to say, like, at a certain point, we're going to start burning out principals and assistant principals because of the workflow. What we did do at Indian Lake is they had a part-time instructional coach. So we removed the AP, but went back to the full-time instructional coach to boost that. And then we have, we hired last year for the first time, we added 2 former principals, like Andy's one, and then Jesse Adams is one, and they float around to help schools catch those meetings. So by us catching some of those harder elementary schools that have a lot of different stuff, like last year they were catching work there, they're going to be freed up to catch. It's like if there's something that you need, like you need an administrator, you need an IP, you need or something like that. We've got that built in, which we haven't had before. We've had 0 capacity, like if an assistant principal went out on leave or principal went on leave. If we could find somebody that was retired to come in and do it, like Mr. Sullivan. Yeah, he's still saying that. But that's what we had to do, but it's not an ideal, it's hard on the school. And I 100% agree with you. I'd like to get an AP back in Indian Lake as quickly as possible.
Okay.
What's that?
Yeah, we also have to do a federal comparability report.
And we have to do a federal comparability report too.
Actually, it's just a real quick question that I'm getting concerns from my constituents. There's a segment of my district that they got a lot of young kids just starting out in school, and Mr. Klein was talking about enrollment numbers, and I don't hold you to this because you can't predict the future. But do you anticipate them having to be redistricted to different schools? Because that's the biggest fear, like among young parents I see is, oh, we love this school, we don't really want to move from this neighborhood, but we don't want to.
There's 2 things in life I would never want: a tax increase and a redistricting, because everybody loves their elementary school. I think that, obviously, like we could address the overcrowding at Burris by shifting kids to Beach Elementary, but there's also a lot of subdivisions that are coming online in the Beach Elementary district. So what I don't want to do is move kids twice. Move them once and then 2 years later move them back. I think that the other thing that I think we're going to see, and this is just going to be a function of watching what happens with home values in Sumner County. Like, for instance, if you jump out of your district over to Creekside, started going to Station Camp, now goes to Liberty Creek Elementary. The Creekside subdivision for over a decade or 2 has had, or since it started, has had 280 elementary students in it, right around that number every year. And then, when you think they're going to go to middle school and those kids are going to move up, those people sell their houses and move to Carrollton or somewhere else in a bigger house. And a new group of elementary age parents come in. But what's happened over the last 3 or 4 years is those home values have gone from $250,000, $300,000 to $550,000, $600,000. So my question is, like, if you look in your area and some of those areas around Burris, some of those houses are selling for $800,000, $900,000 or more now. If you go over to Jack Anderson, like we had added teachers and staff at Jack Anderson for like 20 straight years. And the last 2 years we've removed staff because the average home price over there is probably $700,000, $800,000. And young families or families with young kids aren't moving in there at the same number. So I think what we may be seeing is that in Liberty Creek, Burris, Jack Anderson, we've got a huge number of kids in elementary schools, but those kids are going to move up. Because like at Liberty Creek Middle, Liberty Creek High School, we don't have the same pressure. Mr. Klein pointed this out, Station Camp High School is smaller, or with more grades. If you do it that, it's smaller than Station Camp Middle with 3 grades, and it has 4. And some of that is that you tend to get people that move in and then move up, but in the past, they've kind of trickled out to other areas, and we're not seeing as much of that now. So my question is Burris going to be at 770, 800 in 3 years, or is it going to be at 700? If it's at 700, we're good. If it's at 950, we're going to do some redistricting. So we're just going to have to watch. But I mean, I feel like Durham, I know they're still building, but we're not seeing, and I think in that area too, that's an area where you're going to catch a lot of people moving out each year and moving in. So there's just more mobility in that area of the county. So I would love to never have to redistrict. I think realistically, we will have to at some point. I understand the parents' concerns, and it's very valid that, we love our elementary school, whether it's Beach Elementary, Whitten, or Burris, or Jack Anderson, or wherever it's might be. They tend to really love their elementary school. But yeah, I would, and that would be something, we want to have those conversations with the families ahead of time and prepare. When we did this before the opening of Liberty Creek, we moved a significant number of kids from Beach Elementary to Burris, and from Station Camp, from Station Camp to Little Beach, and then back to Liberty Creek. I would love for us, we didn't have any choice in that because the size Station Camp Elementary was at the time. But I'd love to get in a place where we're not having to move kids twice during their elementary, middle school career. Once would be enough. So I think if we do it, I'd like to do it once and get it done with. I'm hoping we've been kind of steady. Now, if interest rates drop, then I think it's Katie bar the door, people coming. That's the reason that we've been flat on growth the last 2 years is because interest rates are high. The moment that goes down.
Are there any other questions for Dr. Langford? Dr. Langford, do you have any more ones that you?
I'm happy to be quiet, Mr.
Well, go ahead, Mr. Becker.
Well, go ahead. I was, if you were moving on to item 4B. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I'll do it from here. Is that you? Good? Okay. So for the education committee only, because just for everyone's awareness, we've got some education committee members here, some budget committee members here, and some actually are both. But for the education committee, is there a motion for either a positive or negative recommendation?
So move that we have a positive recommendation.
So we have a motion by Commissioner Green for a positive recommendation, second by Commissioner Borgdorf. For the education committee members only, any further discussion or questions? Commissioner Schmidt.
Quick disclosure, so we don't have to go through this, and we went through this last year. I had an overwhelming amount of citizens reach out to me, asking me to not abstain from the future budget. I am going to entertain their wishes from last year and just disclose that my wife does work like she does for the school system. It's a tough job, but she does work in the Sumner County school system and absolutely loves her job. So any kind of pay increase, obviously, it's going to affect our household. I just wanted to disclose that she does work for the school system, but I'm voting on behalf of the entire district and the employees there because they've all reached it. A lot of them have reached out with concerns.
All right, appreciate it, sir. Education committee members, any other questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor for a positive recommendation say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Show that passes unanimous. Budget Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Becker. For the budget now, for folks in attendance, we're shifting over to the budget committee only vote. So for the budget committee only, I would entertain a motion to approve or reject.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion.
Positive recommendation.
To approve it, and Mr. Becker, you seconded it.
Second to approve.
Is there any discussion on this? I'm going to get in queue because I want to make one comment. I very much appreciate how this went this year. It was a lot better than last year. Thank you, Mr. Loin, and your team for working on this early. I hope that at least what I think many of us are trying to do is, we can't predict everything. What we don't want to do in the future, as best as we can, is to have a train hit us. At some point the train's going to, various trains are going to hit you, but at least try to see them 3, 4, 5, 6 years out. And that's what I think we're trying to do here, and I just appreciate, I'm obviously going to support this. number, you explained why, the number, explain where you were. We had some good question and answer. I really appreciate it this year, and I hope we can do this way as often as possible, Mr. Klein.
Mr. Chairman, I am going to vote negative on this because I just don't feel like I've had enough time with it. So I just want you to know that. I don't know that once I come to finish studying it, that I won't be totally in agreement with it. I just don't know at this point.
Understood. Any other discussion? All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
We have one no. Okay, motion carries. So we'll hand it now back to Mr. Becker for.
So next item on the agenda is the budget amendment number 52 is for information only. Is there a motion for education committee only? Motion.
Second.
Ms. Bergdorf.
Second.
Okay, we're docketing on it. Okay, well, we all vote in favor of it.
Okay, back to budget committee. I would entertain a motion for
Motion for the jail chillers replacement.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Jimmy, give the details.
We're good.
Motion adjourned.
All in favor?
Aye.
Turn it off here.
Yeah, my gal, I said,